it's a thing that happens there. Before I went into the civil service as well, which was more serious, which I think about a lot. Like so when I finished me postgraduate, you have these in the UK as well. There's things called graduate programs.
Yeah.
So I was applying for graduate programs left, right, and centre, and I wasn't getting any of them. But everyone in my class, all like, this is the whole kind of thing with this kind of social capital. Like, they had a friend of a friend, or their father was big in a big business account. I didn't know anyone in any multinational companies. The only people that I would know was like cleaners, people that worked as painters, fan delivery drivers. So I didn't have a capital as in like trying to get, a good word in here. So I was applying for all these graduate programs, and it was very frustrating because every time I was applying, they were asking me, instead of just right, I have a 2.1 on my postgraduate, and I'll get to the accent bit now, but I need to kind of explain the story. They were asking what I got in my junior certs and then my leaving cert. So that's like your GCSEs. And I didn't have good results in my junior cert, and I didn't have a leaving cert either. So I didn't have elementary education, so I couldn't put that down. And then the other questions that the majority of them ask, and they all go on about diversity and all, but this is the stuff that basically excludes the people who they want to include in their workforce. Employee reference referral scheme. So I could only put a reference if I knew someone in the company. So people I went to college with and all, like, they were able to put people they knew. They had friends or a friend. I wasn't even getting by the bit. So when I looked into how they do the score, and because they get so many applicants, a lot of these firms, a computer is cutting off half the applicants. So these are the things where the points adds up. So I wasn't even getting to the stage where a human was even looking at my application. So the months were going on, and then a good friend of mine who's from Portugal, who works for, I can't say the name of the company here just because I need to be really careful, big whiskey company in Ireland, and they're all over the world. And he worked for the company, and he said to me, there's a position coming and they're looking for a person who speaks fluent English and also speaks fluent Portuguese. And the job will be basically selling the brand of this whiskey in Brazil. Brazil, the thing about Brazil is that like they love all like big labels like vodka, like the vodka labels are whiskey, and this is a growing industry in Brazil. So they wanted to send someone over. And he said to me, you'd be ideal for this position. And I was like, right, I'll apply for the job. And he said to me then, I think you'll have a good chance. There's no one else. Like, when do you ever find someone that's Irish that speaks Portuguese? Like, you don't actually have it. And I that's why I speak Portuguese as well. Like, because in the inner city, you have a big Brazilian community, and over the years, I just took to the language and kept building and building. So at that stage, when I was finished college, I could speak it fluently. So I applied for the job. You had to make a video for the application, and 2 months went by. Then didn't hear anything what happened. Just thought another application that I didn't get. So I'm nearly a year and a half unemployed. And the guy who's my friend, the Portuguese guy that worked for the company, said, can we meet up? So he says, yeah, no bother. So I met up with him in a restaurant. He said to me, look, I'm leaving the company. I'm going to work for a different company. So I felt really bad about this, but I want to tell you what happened. So when the people were reviewing your application, they didn't get any other applicants. The only applicant they got was you. And we talked about you, and we were talking on WhatsApp group chat, and we exchanged some emails as well. And the stuff that they said about you was just completely disgusting. So they said, how does this knacker speak Portuguese? Like, and they were laughing, and they were putting all this stereotypical stuff up. And in my video then, they put a screenshot of a Dutch Gold can. So Dutch Gold is like cheap lager we all drink in Ireland in poor areas. And they were joking. It was like, what the hell about this? And there's a gang, there's a organised crime gang that's from my neighbourhood called the Hutches. And they said comments like, the Hutches now are learning Portuguese. Like, what's all this about? And then they were like, how is this like the Knacks learning Portuguese? So this was in WhatsApp messages that he gave me. And then there was there was an American guy in the WhatsApp conversation as well, because he then sent in the comments, like, and the Portuguese guy gave me all the screenshots. He says, what's a knacker? And then another person replied and says, it's our version of white trash. What yous have in the States that live in the trailer parks, this is our white trash that live here in the flats. And he said the flats. And then the American guy says, what's the flats? And he says, it's where all the people that live free off the government live. And then they showed also a caravan. So some members of the traveling community live in mobile homes. So when I seen this, he was like, look, once I go to Portugal, then you can do whatever you want with this. So I wanted to make a complaint about this. And I knew with the equality legislation, they were discriminating against me on my accent, my social, economic, my class, even though they were using the words knacker, which is a derogatory term towards the travelling community in Ireland. I went to what's called the Workplace Relations Commission, and in Ireland we have equality legislation. And the equality legislation in Ireland covers 9 grounds. So it covers gender, nationality, age, religion, marital status. So it covers all these types of grounds, but it doesn't include social economic status. And this is a very controversial issue, because in Ireland historically, this is where the discrimination, this is where the exclusion. Before, we've always had issues around racism towards the travelling community, but other communities have come into Ireland and we've had experience of racism with this. But this is a historic thing that goes back generations, and it's the one taboo issue that successive governments will not include in the legislation. So when I went to the Workplace Relations Commission with this complaint, they said to me, you can't accept the complaint because the discrimination is on social economic grounds. So I couldn't even get to the adjudication stage where the guy could look at the form. I could only get to the 4th stage, and the guy said to me then, look, you are clearly, as clear as day, discriminated against here. Like, if this was on gender, if this was on race, you would have them, they would be paying out serious amount of damages. And they were like, but because they're discriminating in the class, there's nothing you can do. And so I was thinking, like, Jesus, what will I do? This is disgraceful, you know? And it was so frustrating, because we've lots of equality civil society groups in Ireland, and they push issues on a lot of things, but they don't really push stuff on class and social economic status. Like in our neighbourhood, like if you look at a lot of the stuff civil society does in Ireland, they don't really push on this. So I felt powerless about what I could do. And I talked to some politicians about what I could do about, and they said, you could go to the media. Well, Dublin is a small place, you know, like I was thinking, if I go to the media, what could happen with my career? And do I really want to keep this inside, that it's following me around, and that I'm known then as the person who was discriminated against, and then is seen as someone who was just given a job because you're discriminated against. So it was hard, but I just let it go. Then I was like, right, do you know what? We can't do anything about it. It's just time to move on. Sure, it's their loss that I can't